Okay, welcome back to our third in a series of debates for the 7 upcoming assembly races. Today, we're doing District 3, Seat E in West Anchorage, one of the 5 open seats. We're joined by Anna Brawley and Brian Flynn. But before we get into our opening statements, I'm going to thank our sponsors, GCI, IBW Local 1547, and of course the Alaska Political Report. We're going to start with opening statements. We're going to go into some topics and issues affecting Anchorage. We're going to have a candidate Q&A to one another, and then we're going to have some more topics about Anchorage, and then we're going to go into closing statements. So we've drawn at random, and we're going to start with you, Brian Flynn, for your opening statement.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. My name is Brian Flynn. I'm running for District 3, West Anchorage. I moved here for an opportunity. I was at a time in my life when I wanted to change, and I decided to come to Anchorage. Had a great opportunity for a new career. It's a career I still have today, and I love it. Over 21 years later. Over time, ended up meeting my wife on a blind date at a coffee shop in the building that we both coincidentally worked in, and married a year later and ended up buying that coffee shop 4 years later and experienced the American dream right here in Anchorage. And all the opportunities that I've had, I am looking to bring to more people as we move forward and trying to stimulate the economy. There's some big issues that we all know are hindering that right now. We need to get back into some more fiscal accountability. First and foremost, we need to also make sure that we're securing the port. If we don't secure the port, we don't have a city. And I think that gets overlooked in all the minutia of what we see on a daily basis. Also need to start with looking at workforce development and housing. There are big problems right now. We've got big projects coming online in the state, whether it's infrastructure, big FedEx, or even Amazon, who are going to be having big projects, and we need the help. We don't have it. Whether it's homegrown or brought up here, we need to stimulate that and get them up here and stop the outward migration that we're currently seeing. Taxes need to be reduced, or at least spending needs to be reduced, and we need to find ways to find efficiencies. In my career, I've worked in project management, property management, broad spectrum of accounting, charitable organizations, councils, boards, commissions, and I want to bring that to the table because I've been really successful at working with lots of different people in diverse environments to get the job done. And I want to make Anchorage a great place to live, work, and raise families. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Anna Brawley, your opening statement.
Sure, and thank you again for having us today. My name is Anna Brawley. I'm running for Assembly in West Anchorage, and I'm running because I really want to see us get out of the headlines and back to work. So I believe that we are a great city, that we have great opportunities, and that we have a lot of potential to develop. In fact, I'm running also because I love cities. I'm trained as a city planner, even since when I was a kid playing SimCity, and brought that into my career working with communities across the state as a consultant. So I've worked with the city of Anchorage, I've worked with small towns, I've worked with state agencies and nonprofits, and really the common thread is making sure that people can make good plans, carry them out, execute them, implement them, and make our city better. So some of the things that I'd like to see happen in Anchorage, I really support us building more housing. I believe that's one of the big keys to why people are leaving the state, even when the jobs are there. It's just hard to make a life here. It's hard to afford a home, hard to afford childcare and health insurance, and all of those issues are really impacting our economy's ability to grow. So what I bring to the table, I have skills and experience, again, working as a city planner, working as a consultant in the private sector, and also working in my community. So I've been chair of my community council in Turnagain and got involved over a decade ago when we first moved to Spenard. So my partner James and I have been happy to call Turnagain home since 2014, and just again wanting to step up and serve the city.
Thanks, Anna and Brian. Appreciate that. For the first topic, I want to talk about homelessness. We've had the Sullivan Arena for almost 3 years now with COVID. Then we had the Centennial Park kind of thing last summer that happened. There's been this Golden Lion, these other buildings. There's been a fight over that. This problem goes back way beyond this administration. It goes back decades, and it's worse visibly for sure. And I think it's arguably just worse in general. We seem to have had a problem kind of solving it. So, and I'll start with you. How do we tackle this problem? What are your thoughts about solving this homelessness crisis and stopping the fighting, but actually solving it?
Yeah, I believe that we do definitely need to stop stop the fighting and find some common ground. And I know that's been really difficult. I've watched since I moved here, I've watched our city really grow in homelessness. And I think a big part of that actually is housing. I think there's the folks that we see visibly out on the street. A lot of those folks need treatment. They need a leg up, and they really need the basics, even having a place to keep their stuff and take a shower before they get to a job. So I think there's some really practical things that we need to help people so that they can help themselves. I also believe that rent keeps going up, that people have trouble finding housing. And so we see a lot of people sleeping in their cars or taking on more and more side jobs or side gigs to make things work. And so I really think the housing market is part of the solution. And in terms of using the Sullivan, everyone that I've talked to across the spectrum have said that the Sullivan is not a solution. I think it served a purpose when we really had that need during COVID. But since then, we need to move past that. We need to have shelters that are safe for people. People don't want to go to a shelter where they're worried they're going to be assaulted or that their stuff is going to be stolen. And so I really think we need safe shelters for people. And again, we need solutions beyond shelters. So that's housing, that's treatment, and that's working with the state and other communities.
Yeah, Brian, on homelessness, the Sullivan, the Golden Lion, the Centennial, this problem. What are your ideas or thoughts on how we can really solve this problem?
Well, I agree that the Sullivan is definitely not the long-term answer. We need to start looking at long-term solutions, working together between the administration and the Assembly. They're just not working together. They're not coming together with ideas. They work separately. They're working on separate plans. That's why we're at where we had to go back to the Sullivan this year. We have to look at a center that looks at each individual problem on a triage basis, get those people to the places they need to go, whether it's treatment or finding housing that's affordable, that they can at least get started, get to their jobs, get cleaned up, or whether it's treatment. We don't have enough treatment in this town for substance abuse, alcohol abuse. We need to bring some of the private groups that have been successful to the table and learn from what they're doing, and not shut them out the door and not bring in their ideas. There are great ideas out there that are not being listened to, and we can work together by finding those solutions and getting the people who are experiencing homelessness on the path to housing. We can't just put them in housing and expect the problem to go away. It's just going to continue to come back. We have to treat the problem at the root of where it's coming from. And we can do that by working together and getting the job done.
Thanks, Brian. Next, I want to talk about something that's affected basically every single person in this city is snow plowing. We had an historic snowfall in December, and even now, some of the roads, the two-way roads are 1.5 lanes, and there's the state roads, but there's the city roads that have been really, in some cases, not really plowed effectively. So,
Right.
We live in a subarctic city. We were the pitch for the Winter Olympics a couple times in the 90s. So I'll start with you, Brian. What do you think is going on, and how do we ensure that our roads we had school closures, we had people couldn't get to work, there was a big economic impact of this lack of plowing. So how do we make sure the roads are plowed?
That's a great question, and I know that's been a topic of discussion when I'm talking to the people of West Anchorage as well. The problem is that we need better planning. The situation could have been dealt with a lot sooner. In my line of work in commercial real estate management, we do contracts for snow removal in the end of summer. We don't wait till we have a problem and then try to solve it. We have those things in place, and we have contingencies in place in order to get these problems resolved if they come up. There's also some confusion between the city and the state. I think that needs to be worked out. It's been evident that if you look at the map online, it's very confusing. There's some roads that are chopped up, that some part state, part city. Nobody knows who's doing what. The citizens get frustrated, and there's no solutions.
There was a joke. It was like the Hunger Games.
Exactly.
The sectors were.
Yeah, and of course the sidewalks. I drive to work every day. I drive down Minnesota to get to work, and the sidewalks are atrocious. You're seeing kids, you're seeing ADA, you're seeing elderly trying to maneuver sidewalks that are not cleared, and then you don't have a solution to it. It's just not getting done. We're a winter city, obviously. Obviously we had a problem in December when we had an abnormal amount of snow, but that's not an excuse. We're 3 months out now, and we're still seeing roads. And Anna, you go to roads doing door knocking. You can't park your car on the street. It's not getting done, and it needs to get done.
Yeah, and I'll go to you. I mean, we did a video on this. It was in December, and I would say I grant, okay, big historic snowfall. You give them a week or a little bit of time, but I mean, there's still today in March, and we're kind of almost with breakup. It's been warm the last couple of days. There's been some melting, but even some of the like what Brian said, some of the roads are just the sidewalks aren't taken care of. So people are walking in the streets, or they're having to kind of walk over mounds. So how do we ensure that our roads are plowed and our sidewalks are plowed in a winter city that we're living in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a serious issue, and I think it's been the worst that I've ever seen it for sure. And I know that people are frustrated. It is the number one thing that comes up, and I know that it's had a cost. So, like you said, people not feeling safe walking to work or being able to drive. I've also seen car parts all over the city stuck in our snow berms, and I think we'll see more as the snow starts to melt. And that's really insurance claims, that's people's damage to their cars, and it's also just the stress of hitting somebody or worried that you're going to hit somebody. So I think it is a planning issue, and it's an operations issue, and I think it's also a symptom of some of the bigger problems that we're seeing in our city, which is the number of vacancies. Organizations, whether it's public or private, cannot operate if they don't have staff. And it's hard to hire staff when you don't have competitive wages. And so I think that's an issue that was flagged in the summer that was going to be an issue. And lo and behold, a few months later, it did come to pass.
Well, we saw that with the school bus, situation too. This only had so many school bus drivers, and parents were having to wait in line for hours or whatever to pick up their kids and take their kids to school. So
yeah, and there's a cost to having to be reactive. And so even if we are now looking at private contractors to clean up the mess, it's going to cost the city more, I think, in the long run.
You guys both mentioned housing. When we talk about homelessness. I want to talk about housing in general, but first I'll start with you, Anna, and talk about specifically this Holton Hills development that was proposed in Girdwood. It was a 2-year process. There was a bid. A lot of some people in Girdwood got very upset. They went to the community councils. Ultimately, the assembly voted to kind of kill the project or table the project. What do you think about the Holton Hills development? And generally, I guess more broadly, is that have a chilling effect? When we have the average cost of a home in Anchorage is almost $500,000, and it seems like whenever somebody wants to build something, the NIMBY people, wherever they are, get very upset, and we don't see a lot of building going. I think HFC said we need 25,000 new housing units by 2026. And I think last year it was like 500. So Holton Hills specifically, do you support that or not? And then housing in general.
Yeah, so I was definitely disappointed to see the outcome of the Holton Hills project. I'm not as familiar with the deal that HLB made, so I would certainly want to see more information about that before I evaluate the pros and cons of that. But I think the bottom line is it does have a chilling effect on development. And I believe that that other developers look at that and say, is it worth the cost of doing business in Anchorage? And I've heard that from developers who do work in West Anchorage as well. So one of the projects that I worked on with my community council last year was a proposed sale of land next to the Rustic Goat. So there was the proposal from the city to sell the land, a developer interested in building housing there. And there were a lot of concerns from the community, like you said, not just NIMBY, but really, how is this change gonna impact my where I live? And so in order to kind of navigate that, I hosted a community meeting, we had a survey, and we really worked with folks to understand what they like about that area, what they'd like to keep, and then what kinds of things they would want to see there. And so I think in terms of how to navigate some of those controversial issues, I think coming back to where we can find common ground is important. And I am concerned about the impact of no votes like that on the ability to build, because I think we do need to signal that we are open for business as a city.
Yeah, so Brian, about Holton Hills, and also say, I forgot to mention, I've had some friends who are builders in the Valley, and they kind of joke on Twitter. They say, thank you guys, we're getting all this business, building more in the Valley because you guys don't seem to want to encourage building. So now the Valley, they're building.
Yep.
So, Holton Hills specifically, and then more broadly, housing in Anchorage and the cost of housing.
Well, Holton Hills is something that I'm very familiar with. I'm on the HLB Advisory Commission.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
We spent about a year going over Holton Hills, and I think there were positives and negatives the entire time. I think ultimately it was an RFP that went out that was not. They didn't start originally with the people of the community and talking to the people of the community. It was kind of done, and it was a transition of administrations. It was done before the Bronson administration, and the Bronson administration tried to catch up. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the citizens of Girdwood were, hey, we want to be involved as well, after the RFP had already gone through. And so, and then we were kind of listening to the citizens of Girdwood who would drive up to the meetings, and, and they would come up in mass, 25, 30 people saying they were against it. But, we listened to what they were saying. We looked at everything. Ultimately, what our positions as advisory is, we have to look at the core of, is it good for Anchorage? And I voted yes, it was good for Anchorage because we need development, we need housing. And then, of course, it went into the process.
Well,
of being
especially
approved.
Girdwood. I mean, you can't
yeah.
buy a house. I don't think you can even find a house
Yeah.
to buy unless you know
And-
somebody who's off market, doing a deal or.
And I think that ultimately, the people down there, they're looking for affordable housing, and they need workforce housing. It's different than Anchorage in a way because it's more of a resort area that's not regular Anchorage Bowl. So, the people that were, looking at that, a lot of them were just saying, hey, I can't afford to live and work in Girdwood. I have to commute in, and we get that. And so I think that, to the extent that it went to and it ended up failing, we're going to have a hard time getting more development. We're going to have more, developers coming to the table are not going to come because they're like, hey, I'm going to spend a year and a half going through this and then ultimately not get it. And we have to encourage development. We have to encourage these RFPs to go out, but we have to actually engage the community as well.
I've talked to several developers who have said I would never engage in using a lot of resources on something. I mean, I might do something small, but I just don't feel like it's a friendly. Yeah. Whereas in the valley, they are building a lot out there.
And you're mentioning the valley. We're losing people to the valley constantly. We're losing police officers to the valley. 150 cars a night are being parked in Eagle River because they're living in the valley and not living here. We need to find ways to incentivize people to come back to Anchorage and start to live in Anchorage again.
Next thing, he talked for a little. Do you want to say anything else, Anna, or topic?
Yeah, I think there is a way forward to work with the neighborhoods to find that common ground and help people understand that more housing is better for everybody.
Next thing I want to ask about is the relationship with the mayor and the assembly. We've seen, on the mask mandate deal in 2020 and the homelessness issue and just really a lot of issues. It's been contentious. Obviously, it's politics and it's fighting, but it's gotten really toxic. And I'll start with you, Brian. How do we improve that and make it to where last night was actually a pretty normal meeting, but so many meetings it's become kind of a joke and almost a farce, and there's been such a negative interaction between the assembly and the mayor, and I think both sides are probably to blame at some level, but how do we improve that relationship with the mayor and the assembly and moving the city forward?
That's a great question because it's a big topic. The contentious relationship between the mayor's office and the assembly is put out in real time every 2 weeks. It's a drama. We have to get back to working together. We have to find common ground and start working through the items that need to be addressed here in Anchorage. That's not being done. Both sides want to dig in. They don't want to work together. We have to find, if we have to put them in a room, put them on a retreat, I don't know. We have to find some way of bridging that gap. And I don't know if it's just a personality thing. I don't know. We all disagree on things. Anna and I have differences, but I think we could work together on things as well because we want to and ultimately find solutions for Anchorage. And that's why we're running for office. That's at least why I'm running for office because I'm not seeing it getting done. I'm seeing fighting. I'm seeing on both sides, they're not willing to work with the other one. And I think that it's high time we get people in there who want to work with both sides and get the job done.
So, and on the assembly and the mayor relationship, and also I forgot to mention that, they have this since Bronson's been mayor, they have this kind of veto override on the assembly. So there's been that element as well. And, I know you've both been to the meetings and watched. It's very kind of contentious and toxic. So what's your thoughts on making that, I guess, going back to a little more boring assembly meetings?
Yeah. No, I think that would benefit everybody, and I think Brian's right that we've had a lot of drama, and that just can't continue. We can't continue to move forward that way. So I think one opportunity is that we will have some new members on the assembly, and so I think folks are coming in with new energy, new perspectives. I'm hoping to certainly bring that to the assembly. I think that will help break that logjam. I think also, as a planner, we work to build consensus. We don't just get satisfied with a majority vote. It's really finding a solution for the most people. And so that's what I really want to bring. And in projects where there have been contentious issues, whether it's land use or other policy issues, you really start from building common ground. So you start from, what values do you share? And starting from the place that we all want to see Anchorage succeed. And so that's one thing that I would like to, have the opportunity to start fresh and start working with, like you said, I guess not both sides of the aisle, but both sides of the dais, and really find common understanding that we have serious issues to fix and that we cannot move forward as a city until we do that.
Okay, we're going to move to the candidate Q&A period. So it's going to be a question and a response and then a brief rebuttal. So we'll start with Anna. You'll ask the first question, and you guys can each ask two. So we'll just kind of go in order. So
Okay.
Anna, you can go first, and then we'll reverse it to Brian.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by asking a question that I've heard from a lot of people, and one that I've heard you answer before, but maybe not getting right at the core of the issue. And that is that. So your wife is the purchasing director for the city, appointed by Mayor Bronson, and oversees all of the staff who deals with the city's contracts. And so I've heard a lot of concern from voters that that's a conflict of interest. And I know you said in the past that you would handle that by recusing yourself from votes. But I also saw last night that the Assembly voted to make permanent the oversight of contracts with a much lower threshold. So that means more and more of the Assembly meeting agendas are going to be votes on basically contract approval. And I know there's also been a lot of concerns about contracting and where those contracts go, how they've been awarded, and whether they went through the process. So my question is, if you're recusing yourself from most of these votes to avoid that conflict of interest, how do you see yourself representing the people of West Anchorage and holding the city accountable?
Well, when I say I recuse myself, it would be if I had a personal gain or some sort of nepotism with a contract, or if there was some financial gain for a contract that was done directly from my wife, the director. Most of the contracts that are done through an RFP process within staffing within the purchasing department. So when those RFPs go out, they go through a review process. They go through the review process of the department that they're going under. So let's say they need to go buy police cars. They're going to go through the process. They're going to have 5 to 7 people review that. It comes back to the Assembly for approval. Now, unless I own the car shop where they're buying the police cars from, or I own whatever, or one of my family members does, or anything like that, that's when I would recuse myself. It doesn't mean that every single contract I would have to recuse myself. That's ridiculous, because it would have to be a situational. Like we see with Member Zolotel, she recuses herself when she feels there's a conflict of interest with the coalition that she runs, and she recuses herself off the dais. It would be the same thing for me if it was my company, for example, that was getting a contract. I would recuse myself because I'm directly connected with that particular contract, whether it's I work there, I own the company, or a family member does. But other than that, there shouldn't be any kind of conflict of interest that would make me recuse myself from every contract that came up there.
And a brief rebuttal if you'd like.
Yeah, so I understand the rules around conflict of interest, and I know they are narrow in the law. I think the issue that I've heard from people is really more about the role. So the role of your wife in the Bronson administration. And I guess maybe put another way, if it comes down to needing to hold the mayor accountable, are you willing to do that when he is your wife's boss?
Are you specifically talking about sole sources that are being done by the mayor's office outside of the purchasing department?
I guess I'm saying that the purchasing director, the buck stops with them because they are the head of the department. They oversee all the employees. And we've also seen a history of retaliatory firings from the Bronson administration. And so I think the concern is if you're in a position where you're having to raise those questions, and then your wife is directly working for the person that you're asking, is that not a conflict?
Well, I can tell you that there's items within Title VII that she follows. She follows the Title VII religiously. She's told the administration no when at times when they wanted sole source contracts, because it isn't in line with Title VII. So even she stands up to that because she is governed by Title VII. She's not governed by the mayor. She has a job. She's performing it for the city, and she is not beholden to being to putting out a contract, sole source or not, or in any way, shape, or form that violates Title VII, because that is, to her, is the one line item in the charter that she follows to make sure that it's done correctly, and so does her department.
Okay, we'll go to Brian now for your first question to Anna.
Okay. What is there, if anything, what do you think there is that we would work well together on?
I've heard a lot of common ground between us in terms of housing, and I know that you work in the real estate industry. As planners, we think about housing as one of the main things that a city needs to provide. So I believe that there's a lot of room there. I would love to see cranes in the sky. I'd love to see more development. And I know that for a city, if we don't grow, then we're going to stagnate. And I believe that we're in that position now. And so I really believe that we really, like I said, need to get the city back to work. And I think the issue isn't not the jobs, it's really getting the people to those jobs. And what's good for people is good for business. And so I believe that that to the extent that the city has
control over the services that people expect, like our schools, our roads. I believe that we can all agree that those need to be working better so people can get to work.
And Brian, brief rebuttal if you'd like.
I agree. I mean, you seem to have an extensive history in planning, city planning, and working through situations of as they come up for cities. And I think that my experience in real estate, your experience in planning, it seems to be the hot topic of how do we get housing here? What kind of outside the box ideas can we come up with that are not being thought of or not being looked at? We have a lot of vacant commercial buildings. Can we economically renovate those buildings into housing? We haven't had those discussions. We can look at that, and then as far as like the layout of how does it work for the people? How does it work for them connecting with buses or let's say non-motorized vehicles or not vehicles, but say bikes or anything to get around? I mean, I understand that, some of the layouts and things, but as far as like, downtown's one thing, West Anchorage is another. My portion of West Anchorage, I'm in the very south part of West Anchorage. Biking to work is not as feasible for someone like me because there's no straight line to get there. And, I coming to someone like you who has better knowledge of how to plan these things and coming together with common ground and good ideas, I think that could be a really good way to go.
Okay, and we'll go with your second question to Brian.
Okay. Well, I guess one thing that I've seen you say in the past is that you want to bring conservative leadership to West Anchorage. And so, and clearly we're maybe on opposite sides of that. I certainly lean progressive. I'm not registered with a party, but I do, I stand by my values. But I also am willing to set aside any kind of ideological agenda to really get things done for Anchorage. So I wonder, given what you've said in the past and what you've said more recently, how do you square those two things, that you're presenting yourself as representing a particular ideology, but then wanting to work together with folks? Well,
I'm a fiscal conservative, but I work across lines. I work across party lines. I work with many different groups of people. To label someone just a conservative does not mean that they're closed-minded or right-wing, or some of the things that people call me they're not even true. And frankly, people have done that to a lot of people that say they're conservative. From conservative, we mean looking at fiscal accountability, looking at responsibility, working together. Those are the things that I look at as being conservative. And the value of working together also goes across every line of people. It doesn't just mean I only want to stay in my tribe, because that doesn't work. It doesn't stay. We're seeing it in real time with the assembly and in the mayor's office. You've got two completely ideological groups who will not talk to each other. And I think that there's an opportunity for a new assembly and a new group of a new voice in the assembly doing the talking that needs to be talked, that says we need to start talking to each other. We might not like each other, we might not agree with each other, but the conservative value that I have is going back to a time when people didn't put their party affiliations aside. They put their beliefs aside, because at the end of the day, they wanted to do what was best for the people, and that's what I believe in.
And a brief rebuttal if you'd like.
Yeah, then I guess my follow-up would be that given all of the concerns that we've seen in the paper with the Bronson administration in terms of vacancies, contracting questions, and really misuse of public funds, such as the big hole in the ground down the way with the started navigation center. If being conservative is about fiscal responsibility, then where do you see the Assembly's role in terms of accountability and asking some of those questions that I think will not be answered by the time the election's done?
You guys are sneaking in more questions.
Right. No, the thing of it is that when I look at that, I look at from looking at the administration's perspective too. I mean, I think it's better in the interest of the administration to be outward with things, not be secretive about them, because all it does is just fester more speculation. It needs to just come out. If there's mistakes made, own it. If you need help to if we need help to get it right, let's write it. If they say they made a mistake with the navigation center, okay, let's make sure you don't make that mistake again. But it's a costly one. Those are the things that need to be talked about out in the open. But when you have the contentious relationship that is currently happening there, that it tends to be that veil of secrecy that goes between the two parties, because they don't want to either be tripped up by the other side or be accused of things or have things embellished that may or may not be true. And they, in the administration, I believe, have fallen short because they had the opportunity to do it. They still have the opportunity to do it, and they're not doing it.
Okay, then we'll go to Brian, your last question to Anna, and then we'll go on to some more topics.
Now, what year did you move here? Was it 12 years ago?
2011, July 2011.
Do you feel that the economy is better today than it was when you first moved here?
I would say it's not. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of friends and people that I know my age who have left because they don't have job opportunities here, but really because they don't see that there's leadership in this state and in this city to have a future. And so I agree that the economy is not where it needs to be. I know we've suffered from a recession for several years, and then followed by COVID and the kind of global disruption from the pandemic. And so yeah, I think that we right now are unfortunately on the decline, or we're stagnating. And I remember kind of the good days of Anchorage back in the early 2010s. So I do believe that we have a lot of problems to fix, and that we really need to take those seriously and kind of set aside some of these other divisive issues and move forward on those.
And then Brian, rebuttal?
Well, I mean, I've been here since 2001. When I first got here, this city was booming. Construction was everywhere. Cranes were moving. We were doing multiple commercial deals right off the bat. And 2011 oil prices were booming. We had great. We had a thriving economy. With my contract with the state, they had a $30 million capital budget.
That was back when there was $2 billion capital budgets. Now
Exactly. And it was
way less.
That afforded them the opportunity to do a lot of great projects. And now that's down to zero. It's really tough to see. And I feel like the economy now, there's a lot of taxes. We've instituted the marijuana tax, the alcohol tax, property taxes. The property taxes have gone up 19% on my house in the last 4 years. It's out of control, and I think that's one of the driving factors as to why housing is not affordable. It's hard. It's going to be harder and harder for people to buy houses. People are not moving up here because of the sticker shock of those property taxes. So if we want to incentivize that, I would hope that we could work to reducing taxes by reducing spending.
Okay, we're going to go to a few more topics about Anchorage, and then we're going to conclude with closing statements. You guys both touched on this, and I'll start with you, Anna. There's going to be at least 5 new members of the Assembly. There's 2 incumbents running, so there could be more, but at least 5. And you're one of the races where it's going to be the incumbents not running, us and Quinn Davidson. So if you were to win, as somebody who's not been on the Assembly, how do you, with so many new people and loss of, Forrest Dunbar and Jamie Allen went to the legislature, and Peterson's termed out, and Quinn Davidson's not running for re-election, how do you plan on navigating being on a Assembly with basically almost half of the people new?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big challenge. And like any organization, you want people with experience to come in and to keep that institutional knowledge. So I'm certainly a new candidate. I have not run for office before, but I do bring policy experience. I've been chair of the Budget Advisory Commission, still serving as a member. And so I've looked at the city budget for the last few years. So I understand all the cuts that we have made, and it is really challenging to find places to cut further. But I also understand that that costs are going up, and so people, it's not a sustainable path that we're on. So I believe that that I'll be able to come in, not starting from ground zero, not starting blind, and able to use my city planning experience, my work in the private sector, and again, my work on community councils, running meetings, as well as the Budget Advisory Commission.
So Brian, same question. If you were to win, a lot of new people, loss of kind of institutional knowledge, how would you navigate being on an Assembly with almost half of the people brand new?
I think that the first thing we need to do is get together as a group and come to a common ground as a group, and understand that we're still going to have differences. There's still going to be people within that, no matter who wins, there's still going to be people on the Assembly that don't agree with each other. So finding a way that we can understand we disagree, but we can still work together for the city and work, also with the administration, find out what kind of way we can bridge the gap with the administration, because ultimately you do have to work together and find that common ground. And that's something I've done over my career. I've worked successfully between, navigating people through the smallest of leases to the multi-million-dollar capital projects or capital improvement projects. And every single time you're starting with someone you may not really know very well, but by the time you're done, you find out where you work well together, and you find out what has been successful, and you end up achieving the goal, and which is ultimately a successful project or lease or any other kind of deal that we would do or contract that ultimately has helped the end user.
Next thing I want to talk about is body cams. A couple of years ago, the residents of Anchorage voted to fund these body cameras for APD officers, and they haven't been implemented. There's been some pushback from the union about clarifying kind of storage, I guess, of the material and then when they're released. So I'll start with you, Brian. Do you support the use of the body cameras, and why do you think it's been more than 2 years where we haven't been able to figure this? I mean, the troopers use them. Many big and small towns throughout the country use them. So why haven't we been able to get that done? And do you support the use of the body cameras for the APD officers?
Well, ultimately, like I said, there's the pushback, I think, is because the scrutiny of having a camera on you while you're working. If all of us were walking around with a camera on us, are we going to make mistakes? Yes. So we're going to be second guessed. The thought of being second guessed, but I also understand the argument that if something were to happen, you have that footage to see what the issue was and how it was dealt with. I know that talking with some of the officers, they're not happy about it. They don't really want this to happen, but they understand that the people did vote and they want it to happen. But I think that might also play into recruiting for more officers. Are they going to be more or less open to applying for a job where they feel like they're going to be scrutinized or second guessed at every turn? I also don't see that we have an issue with the police department here. I know nationally there's issues that have happened and where those body cams have come in and horrible issues, just like we saw in Tennessee. And if that was rampant here in Anchorage, which I don't believe it is, it would be great to have the cams on them and functional to take care, to see what was going on. So I really do. I had the opportunity to do a ride along with APD. We ran into some situations where you do a ride along, you think you're in an episode of Cops, and it's just not like that. The officer I was with was just very charismatic. We had some sensitive situations that he handled with extreme grace and was very, just a community officer. He was a police officer, but he was more of a community officer, which was very great to see.
Joanna, same question. Do you support the use of the body cams, and why do you think it's been years where these things haven't been implemented yet?
Yeah. Well, first, I do support the use of body cams, and like you said, the voters voted for it, and so I believe that we should implement the will of the voters. And I believe we've already been collecting the funds for those, so I want to see that actually being put to good use. I also had an opportunity to do a ride along, and I've also been endorsed by the police union's PAC. And so the officers that I've talked to are actually supportive at this point of body cams. So they believe that it is not only protecting the public, but it protects them. And so, it's on record. And I know that the hang up was primarily around the details of the policy, just making sure that it was clear when the footage would be released and whether they would have the chance to review it. And I know there are some serious privacy concerns. Certainly Alaska is a big state for privacy. And so I think at this point, it sounds like it's about to move forward. And I know one of the other big delays was just that we lost our recently appointed chief of police, McCoy. And so I know when you have disruption in an organization, when there's a change of leadership, it does kind of set everything back. So I know people are frustrated that we haven't seen those out there on the streets. And I agree they are certainly something other communities use. And so I think we're almost close, and I think that it will be a tool to make the police better.
The last question before we go to closing statements, you actually both touched on this throughout the debate, but for the last 10 years, we've lost population in the state. The snow plowing is a problem. And I took a picture last year in the park strip. The grass was mostly dead. That's kind of our crown jewel. Mm-hmm. Housing's expensive. I moved here in 2004, and you both touched on the fact that things used to be a lot better and optimistic. But it's really challenging right now. There's a lot of challenges. So what's your vision for the next 10 years? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? And what's your vision for the next 10 years for Anchorage?
And you want me to start?
Yeah, you can go first.
So I am very optimistic about Anchorage. And in fact, I moved here because I love cities and I love this place. I think we have great trails, especially on the west side of Anchorage. That's why people live there. And I believe that we do have real challenges, but we're at the point that I think no one can ignore them anymore. I think we realize that things need to get better. We can't continue on the path that we're on. And again, I'm optimistic. I became a planner because I care about the future. And I really believe that we have so much opportunity here in Anchorage. We're the largest city in the state. We have so many great businesses. We have opportunities for workers. We have diverse cultures. So I think we have all the ingredients for a great city. And I really think we just need good leadership and a good vision and to really move us fully forward into the 21st century.
So Brian, your vision for the next, like I said, the price of housing, the snow plowing, the loss of population in the state. What's your vision? Are you optimistic or pessimistic for Anchorage for the next 10 years?
Overall, I'm optimistic. I believe that there's opportunity to start to work internally with a new assembly and working together on some of the things that we find, or some new ideas, invigorating some new stimulation into the economy, getting people more excited about investing. Coming back from COVID or the loss of their income and inspiring them to start to invest. And we need to start seeing more small business contractors, builders, feeling inspired to start moving again, start investing again. And we're starting to see little pockets of it. And I think that we are going to, with new vision, we're going to start to see that it move in the right direction. We start to see some of the connections between neighborhoods and parts of town. I know we sort of label our districts and our parts of town, but there's a lot of crossover, I believe, with this new redistricting that we see for this first time in this assembly race, and going into different communities, even within West Anchorage, that are diversely different, but also common ground. We all love living here, and I think that if we can unite around the love of this city, we can have a better Anchorage.
I want to thank you both for coming on the debate. It's been really great. We have some great discussion on some good topics. We're going to go to closing statements. We're going to start with you, Anna, a 2-minute closing statement, and then you, Brian. So, and again, I want to thank you guys for coming. It's been very respectful, very good discussion, good debate. Yeah. So we'll start with you, Anna.
Yeah. So again, Anna Brawley. I'm running to represent West Anchorage, and I firmly believe in the future of our city. I believe that we have so many opportunities. We have so many assets. And the first thing that we really need to do is believe in our city. I think that people move here because they love here. People choose to raise a family here and stay here for generations because they believe that Alaska and Anchorage is unique. And I really want to see us move forward. So again, my experience that I bring to the table, I'm a first-time candidate, but I'm trained as a city planner. I've worked in the private sector for over a decade as a planner and project manager, and I've built relationships all over West Anchorage as well as the city as a whole, working in my community, working on the Budget Advisory Commission, and really hoping to just step up and really serve the city.
Thanks, Anna. Your closing statement, Brian.
Yes, and thanks both of you. This has been enjoyable. Again, my name is Brian Flynn. I'm also running for West Anchorage. As I said, I've lived here for over 21 years. I've experience in commercial real estate, working with both private and public entities, whether it's from leasing, sales, to commercial property management. I've worked with contractors, vendors, all broad spectrums of industry to achieve the smallest of leases to the largest of capital improvement projects. I know how to get people together and work together, and I look at Anchorage as the opportunity to start doing that. We're not doing it right now. It's high time we do it because we're going in the wrong direction. We need to right the ship. I'm optimistic we can, but it needs new vision. It needs new voices to do that. Again, when I moved here in 2001, I had an opportunity. It's an opportunity of a lifetime. It turned into a career that I love to this day. It turned into a town that I love. I met my wife here. I have 3 awesome dogs and have lived in West Anchorage for the last 18 years that I've lived here. I love every moment of it. I can't see myself leaving here, but we are seeing a lot of people leave, and we need to start bringing them back. Whether it's people who are moving out of state, moving to the valley, kids going off to school and not coming back because they don't feel there's an opportunity for them here. We need to find ways to do that, and I believe I'm the one that can do that. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank you both, Brian Flynn and Anna Brawley, District 3, Seat E, West Anchorage. And folks, I want to thank you for tuning in. This is our third in a series of 7 debates for the upcoming assembly races. The ballots go out on March 14th, so next week, and the election concludes on April 4th. So it's coming up here. Make sure to vote. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, GCI, the IBW Local 1547, and the Alaska Political Report. Stay tuned, and we'll be come back to you next time with more debates. Thanks again to Brian and Anna.